Welcome to the Storm Room, previously named the Seven Seas Podcast. I have reopened my podcast that has not been active in years, so if you're still around and you're still listening, thank you. The big change to the podcast, besides the name, is I'm going with video. So I'm going to send this out on the original podcast audio platform, but then I'll be doubling down and putting the video on YouTube as well. Nothing really interesting behind me today, just the background of a rented house that we're temporarily staying in here in Roswell, New Mexico. So today what I wanted to do is just again thank you guys for rejoining or for joining for the first time if you've not listened to the podcast before, and I want to talk about why there was such a big gap in time and briefly just talk about the events that have happened between then and now so you kind of understand where I'm going with this, why I'm reopening the podcast, and what I'm aiming at, which in my opinion is something much more substantial than what I was aiming at before. And hey, there's nothing wrong with talking about sailing, and we always talk about people's lives, and it was interesting, but I've done a tremendous amount of growing in the last 4 years. And I think that where we're headed now is going to be much more interesting. So I've got some notes here I'll refer to. So last time we recorded the podcast, I believe we were in Costa Rica, and we were just wrapping up a contract with a gentleman whose boat we ran. We had rebuilt that entire boat. We raced the Transpac with it, and he said he wanted to go around the world. Without going down that whole rabbit, some people think they want to go around the world, and they don't really know what that means. And what it meant for him that was difficult was that the long periods at sea, and I didn't allow any alcohol on board, and not under those passages. That sailing should be interesting enough without alcohol, especially a lot of alcohol. And when you go into other people's countries, you have to follow their rules. Just because you're an American doesn't mean that you get to bring like, hey, I brought my Declaration of Independence, and so you guys should treat me. I should get all the American rules while I'm in other places. And if you're very fearful of the rules and laws of other countries, you shouldn't sail around the world because you are a guest there. And if you haven't traveled internationally, it's really good experience to see the kind of privilege we have in the United States. And I reckon that most people that don't understand that privilege haven't globally traveled. So I'm really glad to have had some of those experiences. All right, so here was the plan. So when that contract ended, we decided that we would go back to New Mexico, which is where we bought a home base. It's a 240 square foot cabin on 22 and a half acres in the middle of nowhere, completely off the grid. Haul water, split wood. In fact, when we went there, we got tattoos that said as much, if you can see that. So the plan was this. I've been wanting to start a online based sailing school for a very long time. Got 25 terabytes of footage that was aimed at and designed for showing people how to sail. Now, I love teaching sailing, and there's nothing like in-person sailing instruction to get your experience and grab lines and put in a reef and helm and feel the feedback on the rudder. And you need all that to sail. But what you can't get in a 3 or even a 6 day sailing course or something is everything else. So priming your fuel system, doing engine maintenance, aligning the shaft on your engine, painting, fiberglass work, electrical work, in-depth navigation work up to celestial navigation, rebuilding a winch. All these kind of things are just not going to happen in that kind of a class. That's not what that class is designed for. And the reason I want to design a class like that is because what it took for me to do the sailing that I have done has been that I needed the skill set. I need to bring the shipyard with me. And not just the shipyard, but there's just so much I had to learn about weather and everything else to be successful at all. So my goal was to try to, in an affordable package, put together a complete knowledge base, like a library, that can be referred to and studied by people that were in my position when I had to learn the hard way. good idea, right? I'm working on it now. The plan was to work on it then. So here's what happened. We went to New Mexico and we had a little bit of money to like kind of make it, but Samantha and I were both worried that we were going to run out of that money before the channel could start making money, and then we'd be in a real pickle, and we would have been. So we decided to start a mechanic shop in New Mexico to kind of like hedge our bets and make a little bit of money. Well, there's something about opportunity cost that that looks like this in a mechanic shop. You're in the middle of nowhere. You're 70 miles from the nearest parts store, and you have one or two clients that you've started out with, and you need a tool. Well, to do the job, you go buy a tool. And unlike boats, cars are really specific. So you need a certain OBD reader for certain brands. You need specialty tools to do this and that. And most of my tools were boat tools. Boat tools, it's really a pretty simple package. I mean, there's fiberglass and there's the same set of components over and over and over, but they're not built by a brand typically. So even on a Catalina, well, that's not going to be a Catalina winch. That's going to be like a Harkin winch or a Lumar or something like that. So what I learned about automobile and equipment repair is you really have to follow the brand, and parts are extraordinarily difficult, especially on the heels of COVID. So we just ran into, I mean, we were doing something new, and this is how it goes. You fail, right? So we were doing a good job repairing, but it's a really steep learning curve, and every brand and every model year you work on is like, it's the same theme, but there's a whole bunch of stuff that you just don't know that's different. So we end up buying a lot of tools, we end up driving a lot, and it was just really hard. It was a lot harder than we thought. At the end we ended up with two employees, and I actually put myself through a school for electric vehicle conversion because we had one client that had this classic old motorhome. This was going to be a big job, like a year and a half, and I hired employees based on that job, and he actually sent it to us, and we bought a 3D scanner, we bought the computer I'm recording this on, we did all this stuff, and we scanned the frame and everything like that, and then we told him how much it was going to cost, and he's like, well, that's going to be too much. And I was like, oh no, right? Like, I figured he knew this was a big massive job, and he really should have, because I gave him the numbers initially. And anyways, long story short, I was really disappointed, and we had another a big remote welding job, and it was kind of like another kind of owner where they really weren't paying attention to what it was going to take to get this done. And I pride myself on doing what I say I'm going to do. So if I say I'm going to go weld that, build that, fix that, I prepare for that, and I invest in that, employees, tools, etc. And so that's the downside of always holding your end and being ready. And when you say yes, you know you can do it, is that you've already paid those opportunity costs to get there. So that was like devastating. We had to let one employee go, and which, no fault of hers on that. And then the other employee I kind of like weaned off, and he was a high school kid who was headed for college. And so it was kind of a mess, and there was a lot of stress. And in the meantime, we had sold Empiricus, and because we weren't getting over there to work on it, and things were going downhill for me and what I wanted out of life. I quit the state troopers to go sail around the world, and I wanted to bring my boys at that time, and that was always a struggle. And then I met Samantha, and then we did some sailing, but we've always had to make a living. And this podcast is about working class people, not the privileged who can hire a crew and go screw around on the ocean. That I don't even find a lot of purpose in that. I find purpose in this very struggle that I'm talking about, which is that it doesn't come easy. You want to go explore the world on a sailboat. This is like a blue collar spaceship. And in the heart of it is knowledge and skill and attitude. So it just felt fleeting, and like everything was just going away, and we just had, and we'll get into more of these subjects. In fact, I'm doing a lot of writing on not just these subjects and what's happened in my life, but in these type of challenges. And so what happened was Samantha went back to flying, and I was like, I don't have a boat now. I'm here in the middle of the desert. My wife has gone flying. Like, what am I doing? So, if we'll get into this, I'm going to try not to rabbit trail. I thought, well, I'm in New Mexico. I should start flying balloons. And I'm looking around at balloons. I'm like, yeah, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to fly balloons. And so I was looking for a balloon, and I was just still itching from, like, haven't gone the rest of the way around the world. We did the Northwest Passage and all sorts of huge, definitely more miles, twice around the world in miles, but I hadn't scratched that itch. And so I started looking for a balloon. And I found a balloon, and I had specifically searched for a capsule or something because I wanted to do a big cross-country trip, maybe fly across America or something. And in Europe, I found a pressurized manned capsule with a giant Rosier balloon, or Rosier balloon, I think is how it's pronounced. And so I searched on this thing, and it turns out that back in the 90s, there was a bunch of really rich people basically on an unofficial race to fly around the world. Bertrand Piccard, Steve Fawcett, who finally did it solo from Australia to Australia. And anyways, a whole bunch of people with a lot of money were building these pressurized spaceship crafts that would hook to giant helium-filled balloons. It's called a Rosier balloon after the last name of the guy who invented the style of balloon using hydrogen. But it's basically a helium capsule, and then think of a puffy coat of warm air wrapped around that capsule to stabilize the volume of the helium. And it's designed to fly for 6 weeks. So I was like, man, this thing's like about 35,000 US. And I was like, I got to check this thing out. So I fly to Scotland and I check it out, and I bought it. It's never been flown. It's the largest existing Rosier balloon on planet Earth. Has a giant pressurized manned capsule. I've been back twice, went back. Good friend of mine, Kelly Kirby, came with me. We cleaned it out, we shrink wrapped it, and we prepped it for shipping, but the shipping is going to be about 35 grand. So that's an ongoing project. And if anybody listening to this is interested in being part of it, I'd love to talk with you. I've got some ideas for it. I'd like to fly it to Greenland or fly it over the North Pole, or it needs to go on a trip that's worthy of its construction. But also, I want that to be about more than me. This isn't the Jesse Osborne show. So it's a really neat opportunity to buy a craft like this. And my original vision for it, once I get it here, is I want to record and document everything in my learning how to fly balloons, etc., etc. And I want people to see that normal, everyday folks can go do amazing things. In that way, this is very much what I want to share with sailing, is like say, hey, yeah, you weren't born rich and with all this, opportunity, but guess what? You were born in America. And even if you're not born in America, there is something outside the scope of what you believe you can do that you can do. And that sounds nice saying it, but what it looks like in the real world is very hard work. And a lot of humility and the spirit of learning has to be around that. So speaking of learning, I had the opportunity to speak at a podcast conference. And although we'll get more into this in the future, I was asked to share something that might help make people's lives better. And even though it was really difficult when we were working with the shop and everything, being faced with the responsibility of passing on a talk to people that they're supposed to get something out of it really forced me to start looking at myself and some unfinished business I had. And I had a lot of anger and hatred towards people who really pissed in my Wheaties when I was younger. And this is now one of my favorite subjects, not my story. but the subject of tearing at your own fabric and looking at yourself and your part in things, and what part was you and what part wasn't you, and not only accepting that, but like practicing forgiveness. And the most powerful thing I've learned as an adult is practicing forgiveness, and it's terrifying. It's absolutely terrifying. And to the degree forgiveness is terrifying, it is rewarding. So that's why I've started this podcast back up. And we're going to talk with sailors, certainly, but we're also going to talk about the ocean and life, and metaphorically speaking, how that shows up. And sometimes it's going to be from this rented house that I'm sitting in that's full of furniture that's not mine. Sometimes it's going to be on a sailboat. It's going to be in an office. It's going to be at an airport. Sometimes it'll be just me passing on something. It's going to be me reading some of the stories that I'm writing about growing up and about life and everything that I'm learning. And sometimes it's going to be interviews. So once again, I just really want to thank you guys for joining and jumping back on the podcast. And it's pretty much open forum now. Anything goes. The only thing I think that we're not going to discuss, because literally I'll have nothing to say about it, is sports, because I don't follow sports and I don't know anything about what would make an interesting sports conversation outside of some sort of analogy. It will be very rudimentary. And politics. Just know I despise all politicians equally, but I do vote. And there's so many people talk about politics and everything, and that's a really great way for folks to take the focus off of themselves and how they show up in the world. It's just a great way to buttress our own bias. And I'm not here to try to change everybody's mind, but what I am here to talk about is what is real and what is happening with you, what is happening with me, and what will happen in our conversations. Not speculation, statistics, and wondering the future of the world. It's going to be about you and I right now and where we aim ourselves. And I am a proponent of aiming up. So, thanks again for joining me. I'm excited. This is going to be really, really cool.